running full speed, but the markets are faster. Quasar Markets Live brings the world's top financial minds to you. Everything you need to know in one place. Learn from elite educators and gain a competitive edge, leveling the playing field for you. Join the conversation. Quasar Markets Live.
Good morning, Quasar Markets Live. I am solo today till Mr. Flanagan comes in a bit here. BigBeat is traveling today. Markets are liking the CPI data. We took a nice little move up here. We can see right on the announcement of the CPI data, nice little move to the upside here. Retracing about half of it so far, so we'll see what we get here. Again, CPI 0.1. Fed's supposed to be data dependent. Are we going to see a cut? To be honest with you, we're seeing traders still sort of load up on a September start to the Fed rate cuts, and we can see that, or we can start to try to look for that. For those that don't know, is Fed Watch. And what we can see here, if it loads up, is that, September is where we've now seen the biggest move. And that if we look at it now, everybody's sort of looking 57% in this 400 to 425 spot. So they're pushing their bets here into that area of it more than they were yesterday. The next meeting, which will be in July, they still have it at, the current rate, 83%. June meeting, 99.9% of that. So again, traders are really pretty much banking that we're not making a move until September here. I'd have to ask, why is that the case? Fed inflation in track, right? Supposed to be data dependent. Time to make a cut. Time to catch up with the rest of the world. And like I said, Qs had made a nice move almost up to their all-time highs. All-time highs on the Qs, which track the NASDAQ, come in at right around 540.81. We got up to 537, 538 area here before retracing a little bit here. So we'll see what we get. I don't want to, it's not nothing, none of this is something to laugh about, but I will also point out this little pump you see that lasted about a minute before retracing was President Trump's tweets about the Chinese trade deal. And as I posted earlier, this is just basically today's announcement said, hey, listen, we agreed to stuff back in, a few months ago in Geneva. And then we said no one was paying attention to it. So we got mad at each other again. And now guess what? We're back to where we were. News about news, not moving the market much. As you can see, it retraced and actually started trading a little bit lower than it had been on the Qs. So I do think that when it comes to tariffs, it's let me see what you actually are what do we have going on? What do you have going on? Not, tell me a rumor about a rumor. Doesn't seem to get people nearly as excited as it would. Biggest loser so far this morning, as I was looking, was GitLab, who had their earnings today. Plunging 12% despite an earnings beat. So, again, sometimes it's not just good enough to make the numbers. They issued fiscal year revenue guidance that's going to be slightly below the estimation Wall Street had. They did beat quarter one earnings. And as you can see, they were expected to do about 212 million in revenue, almost 213. They actually did 214.5. And again, their EPS was supposed to come in right around 15 cents, came in at 17 cents. So good beats across both of those. And again, decent forward projections, but not enough for the market to keep it moving forward. GitLab down about 13.48%. I will say I start to get interested here. Anything down, towards that 38 level, I actually personally start to think it gets interesting for GitLab here, but market not liking what they're seeing there. I did want to show something that I thought was interesting is that the bounce back plays are definitely still kind of working their way through the markets a lot. You can see a lot of these that were down. I kept some of the ones that were down yesterday, making nice bounce backs today, led by Smuckers that was down, up almost a percentage point today after dropping 17.5 points yesterday. CoreWeave was down 7.2%. It's up 2.8% here this morning. Lee Auto was down 1% yesterday, now up 1.5% today. So, again, that theme seems to be playing out a little bit. Take a look, what are the laggards? Is there a reason that they are a laggard or not? And then you can make some decisions there as a trader, whether you think that there is some opportunity in front of you. Some of the things moving up the most today, SailPoint Inc. up almost 15% here, a technology provider that has earnings tomorrow. So this is up in anticipation of earnings. So we'll see what's going on there. Quantum computing back again. QUBT up third day in a row where we're seeing a nice move to the upside here. So Quantum is taking Rigetti with it today. Rigetti up about 8.9%. Rigetti is one that actually has been struggling over the last few days, moving back to the upside. I mentioned CoreWeave in that same area. Rocket Labs, another one that had been under pretty big pressure the last couple of days, starting to move back to the upside here also. And I think my bigger takeaway is we are seeing volatility definitely in play today. So it should be a good trading day as opposed to where we talked about chop yesterday was what was sort of the word of the day. We see a large swath of stocks here that are, in the green and in the green more than 1 percentage point here. I mean, you've got literally starting with this Airbnb down here. If I just keep scrolling up, these are all stocks that are up at least 1% here this morning in the pre-market. And on the other side of that, there is still ones that are to the down, or at least were a little while ago, a decent amount that are down, a half percentage point or more. So there is showing some volatility throughout it. Things that seem to be moving down today are a lot, again, based on tariffs. The steel companies, Nucor is down here about 3.99% here. Cleveland Cliffs was down before pretty significantly also. So was Steel Dynamics. And again, this is due to reports of a potential U.S.-Mexico agreement to reduce Trump's 50% steel tariffs. So again, we're seeing some of the steel companies here getting hit on that news so far this morning. Everything so far seems to really be based around what we're seeing with CPI so far. Tick, if we look at it this morning, right now it's negative about 150. Advanced decline, though, has jumped up to 2080. And you can see here how it's been moving up over the morning. Before that 830 CPI, we were sitting right at a positive about 500 on the advanced decline. It popped up nicely since that time and now up over 2,000. So broad market recovery here based upon the combination of tariff news moving positively, although that really didn't move the needle. But it is part of the morning part, start to our day. And then the second pump really came as CPI data came out. So I'm just trying to find my article on that. We'll say on things moving up the most today, some of them, Tesla making another run here today, up another 2.79%. So Tesla has made the huge move up here from the bottoms just a few days ago at 272, now at 235, looking like it wants to try to make a run and try to make it up back up to that 262 area. So Tesla, Musk came out, said maybe he should have been a little bit nicer to the president and not tweeted, deleted some of his tweets. So definitely there. Other thing to keep in mind there is June 22nd, we do have Robotaxi Day. So for me, that tends to be one of those sell the event type, sell the news. Is I would be playing it to the upside going into June 22nd, but those Robotaxi days, some of those things have been, where we've seen the reversals to the other side. So be wary out there. I do like Tesla. It is still trading very strong here right now. We look at the rest of the Mag 7 outside of Microsoft, which again we know set an all-time high just yesterday or late on Monday night. Has retraced a little bit since then, but still strong here at 470.92, $3.5 trillion company. NVIDIA, though, slightly ahead of it now, so those two continue to battle it out. NVIDIA here back at 145 here, so sort of in the key spot. If we look, that's been the area it hasn't really been able to break through here on the hourly chart. Question is, can we get above it here? Can we break this 145 and hold to make a run back up to the 150, 153 area? That's an all-time high here. Apple has broken back above 202. So it is also moving slightly the upside here today. So again, Netflix on it is, Netflix ended up, it did yesterday down. Netflix looking like trying to go down here for 3-4 straight days. With that being said, still trading at $1,200 a share. And Meta, which I know my man Jason's a big fan of right now, up about a 0.25 percentage point here, is getting a little frothy here as you get to the top of that daily linear regression. I'd be watching it. Approaches 711. If we look at the indices, gold is up here to 33.40. With that being said, it actually skyrocketed up at 8:30 the same time as the CPI data. Doesn't really make much sense there. But gold here, 33.40. Yeah, to me, looks like it's really got to break and hold above this 33.50 for you to think that there's upside potential here. As it does trade across the side of this linear regression in the upside one, could look for it. It doesn't take much for it to move up from here. Could see a nice move. I don't know. I think I'd be more of a fader than a buyer here of gold. Right now, out of the sectors of the S&P 500 covered by the Spider Select funds, it looks like 9 of the 11 opening to the upside. The 2 that are laggards right now is the material sector, which I said steel is sort of hurting that, and the industrial sector, which again, steel is hurting that. So outside of that, everything else looking to open to the upside. Right now, the energy sector is the leader, followed by consumer discretionary. So not tech leading the day here. It is the other sides, the other segments. We will have Mr. Flanagan on. We'll have to ask him here. DXY still under 99 here. Hasn't been able over the last few days to really break and hold above that 99. It's been a little bit of a rough run here. Does King Dollar return, or is the path of least resistance maybe to the downside there? Bitcoin at 109,743 here. Sort of a midpoint here on its linear. Again, what I'm looking at on Bitcoin is on this hourly. If we can break 110.50, watch for a bigger move to the upside here. But until we can break that right now is the key spot to watch. 110, 500. Ethereum had a little bit more room to run up here at 28.14. Ethereum could, if it breaks that 28.50 area, cause a lot of liquidations also. And I am watching Solana closely here today also as the third one on a break of 168, which it tried earlier, not able to do it so far. Break of 168 here. There is a lot of shorts set up on Solana, not believing the hype. So you could see a little bit of a short squeeze there today. Those are sort of the things that are on my watch list that I'm keeping an eye on. Not sure I'm going to buy the dip buyer on GitLab. I'd want to see what it does with the cash open here. With some of these others, I'm just trying to see what the big laggers here. IREN, which is IREN, Iron Limited, Iron Energy. These were selling some notes, so I'm not as interested there. Sunrun, yeah, that one doesn't really get me. Etsy here. This is a pullback after this huge move to the upside. So, wow, look at Etsy. I didn't even notice that thing been running like a champ over the last 10 days or so. So that's a natural pullback there. Nucor, like I said, steel industry getting hit this morning based upon tariff news. Lockheed Martin, another one down here. 463. That's an interesting one. Brown and Brown have been dropping since they announced their big acquisition yesterday, so that's got me sort of staying away from it. And again, they also priced a 4 billion share offering just to buy that fund acquisition. Some of the mining companies down here also today: Freeport McMoran. Steve was shorting McDonald's yesterday. It's continued to move to the downside, down about 4.35% yesterday, down about 22 basis points here this morning. Trading right at about 299.99. So Chinese names, obviously, with the tariff talk lessening or loosening there, we're seeing the Chinese names move up here in the pre-market also. Silver has pulled back a bit. WTI oil continuing to move to the upside here. And those names I'm talking about with China, Alibaba up 1% so far today. Baidu up 1.1% here this morning. JD up 1.33%. NEO up 1.05%. So a lot of the Chinese names are up here about a percentage point this morning. Q's of 535.97. So again, trying to pick up a little bit of steam here as we move closer to the cash open. We're about 8 minutes away. Advanced decline really not moving as much anymore. Still slightly marching up to the upside here. We just broke to highs of the day on the advanced decline, so more positivity moving in. Let's see what's pumping here. See if anything else jumps in here. Urban Outfitters, there's a move to the upside I didn't see earlier. Light volume, though. Light volume, moving that to the upside. VIX down at 1641 here, so the VIX actually starting to break below that 1706 line I talked about here. Sort of looking at your next level of support in that 14.5, 15 area. So again, volatility starting to move down. We are within, percentage points of all-time high on the NASDAQ, which would be 540.81, trading right now 535.70. Who thinks we make it there today? SPY at right now 604.05. That would need to get to 613. Who thinks we're going to all-time highs on the Qs or the SPY here this week? Trying to see what else is hitting the news here. JP Morgan's Jamie Dimon warns U.S. economy could soon deteriorate. I did see a bunch of articles overnight and this morning discussing that, the amount of, our budget is not manageable as the way it is right now. And it's, going to cause a break in the bond market that, has been talked about. We'll see what that brings. Kathy Woods, ARK's Kathy Woods, SpaceX could be worth 2.5 trillion by 2030. Wow. Right now worth 350 billion supposedly. Wow. More people sort of attacking the budget. Paul Tudor Jones balancing the budget will require major tax hikes on the wealthy. Nearly 9 out of 10 of the 300 CEOs surveyed in May said they have raised prices or plan to soon. So again, while inflation might not have hit last month, it looks like maybe it's on track. But as they said, we've been hearing that for the last couple of months, that it's coming and it hasn't. It is time for the Fed to do something. We are about 4 minutes from the open. We sort of muted now after we made those jumps up. We're trading sort of sideways here. So looks like now everything's sort of settled out. Again, Bitcoin trying to break to a high of the day, though. The market looking a little strong here. Watching Costco here gets kind of interesting on its pullback here. Gets below 1,000. I think that tends to be a line that I like at Costco, that round number of support. And look at today. What is our favorite new IPO doing today? Circle. That's not the right one. That's the one. No, that's not what I want. That should be it. There it is. Pulled back to 105. I do think it's got to get back down here towards this 80 level to be interesting. We'll say I was reading Circle and Tether are, when you combine them, the two stable coin providers, they are now the third largest purchaser of short-term U.S. Treasury bills, T-bills. What used to be the premise of huge banks and countries is now more falling on the stablecoin industry. Right after money market funds and Mr. Warren Buffett comes in those, and those two companies now hold more treasuries than China and Japan as nations do um, combined. So interesting, just sort of change of how that's working. Tick has gone back negative, so we're not seeing continued follow through here. So while we got the nice little jump there, we have not seen anything else move at that point now. We are 1 minute from the open. We'll see what we get here as we move into the open right now. Sale point up 15%. Quantum computing up 13.28 here. Rigetti up 8.45. So some of the bigger AI names move into the up to the top here today. Again, Tesla up 2.64%. Apollo Management up 2.56. We are open here. Let's see what we've got. Fuse 535.44 is the opening tick, so to speak. So let's see what we get as the algos start to fight it out here. Advanced decline moved up to about 3,500. Tick is slightly positive to start up right around 100, 174 now. So a little bit of buying off the bat. Now it is sliding a little south, not much of a move. Pretty muted open here, quite honestly, on the Qs. Dow Jones opens up down about 6 basis points here. It is the one that's seeing some volatility here. And again, we've talked about steel, industrials under pressure here. Could be pushing this down. Muted start overall, muted start so far to the day. He's now starting to give up a little bit there. Bitcoin, a little bit of profit taking there. So again, I'm seeing pretty much the same across everything here. Same thing, a little profit taken on Ethereum. Solana even to a little bit of a bigger level there. So the shorts are so far taking control. Bears are pushing it down. So could be some interesting entries for you swing traders on crypto later today. We get a little bit of a pullback down to some of these support levels. Seeing them hold up pretty well. So we've got some pretty good support below us we can start to target. GitLab has jumped up a little bit on the cash open here, so people are buying the dip so far. Let's see if anything's moving to the downside here. Sale point now up 18.24%. Quantum has taken a little bit of a pullback. Rigetti still moving to the upside. On the opposite side of that, GitLab, like I said, has moved back up a little bit. New core What's the lows of the day still? So steel still under a little bit of pressure here. Lockheed Martin seeing a little bit of buyers come in. Not a ton, though. Not a ton of movement so far. Tick pretty muted right around 100. That's not a big move one way or the other, to be honest with you. It's sort of just sitting right around the spot. Not a huge amount of movement there. Like I said, Qs are now slipping down about 534.65. So we do see the algos trying to move us to the downside here. Good morning, Ron. Hope all is well, my friend. Bitcoin sliding a little bit further down, 109.34. So again, we're seeing a retracement right back to the level before CPI on most things here. So that news, well, it gave us a pump. You know, the Qs were trading right at 533.95 at that point. Right now, it moved up all the way to 537, 530, almost 538, but now pulling back down again. So that was a big nothing burger. Not really much of a move. You know, you would have thought you'd see more movement out of a CPI like that, and then combining it with the, you know, tariff news. I will point out a lot of the coverage there being Trump. We're getting a 55% tariff, and China is getting 10%. Not sure how that fixed anything. We do see now at the lows of the day already, lows of the cash market here, moving to the downside a little bit. It does not seem like the markets enjoyed that CPI data that you would have thought they would have enjoyed. And now starting to fade it all off. So again, don't trust that initial move on economic data, things like that. Bitcoin holding up a little bit better here, bouncing back up a little. Same thing with Ethereum, trying to get back above 2,800 here. So crypto market, so is there still a flight to safety? It looks like gold starting to pick up a little bit here this morning. Yeah, Ron, all those were probably a little overblown there. You know, most of the big gainers are pulling back a little bit. The only one that really, yeah, even Sale is a little bit, not really. You know, and again, this is just chop so far. We're just playing around in the chop. Getty bouncing back there too. So yeah, we're just getting a lot of this is just chop, chop, chop right now. Hey, GitLab made a nice jump back up here. GitLab, a real nice move back to the upside here. Had been down as low as 41.56 earlier. Like I said, the buy the dip mentality is still there right now. See here, all the ones that were down the most, cash open, moved to the upside so far. Sunrun would be the one that is not so far. What would that see? Yeah, pretty much all the stuff that was down the most, although Nucor not. So the ones that are affected by the tariffs, Nucor, Sunrun, LMT, those are still sliding. So we do see that. These are not earnings-based moves. These were moves based upon sort of tariff. Lockheed Martin, its stock fell after Bloomberg reported that the U.S. Air Force has cut in half its request for 35 fighters. So that's big, big, big. That one's a little tougher for me to be a buy the dip until we see, that's a huge contract to lose that. So you see them still moving to the downside. Same thing, Steel Dynamics starting to try to bottom out, but steel companies, solar companies that were getting hit, still sort of getting hit. And the one that looks like it wants to run away to the upside still is QUBT. QUBT trying to make a run here. So it seems to be the strongest out of the early morning pumpers so far. And again, whenever all of the Chinese names jump up together, I tend to be a doubter that they will hold up. Those pumps tend to get, sold off. So I tend to be, I'd want to see how it plays out, but I would probably personally be looking to short maybe some of those names today. Again, well, Alibaba is now already retraced on its own. You can see the retracement from Alibaba here. Like Baidu, JD, Neo, Lee, some of those I might look at here. All the Mag 7s moved to the upside so far, but outside of Tesla, pretty muted moves to the upside. Tesla 332.36. So it has slid off here. Oh, there it goes, slides even more down right now. But you can see that gap up it's made the last 2-3 days here. Bitcoin moving back up. So now Bitcoin's starting to move. Here we go. We are moving back towards that high of the day. Let's see what it gets as it tries to get to that 110,300 area. 110,300. So crypto moving up nicely. Ethereum back above 2,800 here. Bouncing back too. So overall, nice little move up. Advanced declines pulled back to 2,300. So you can see it spiked up and now has retraced back pretty hard here. Tick is slightly positive though still. So we see that Dow Jones has stayed pretty steady. Trading right around that 42,850 area. SPY has been pretty flat here over the last few minutes. So again, we're seeing muted moves across the SPY and the Q. They're moving mostly sideways here. Small caps again gapped up again today. So small caps have been the winners last few days here. Has made a nice move on the rut. VIX at 1663. So again, that's a pretty nice little area here. Bitcoin can't break that 110 though. Struggling to do it. Struggling to break 110 right now. Same thing. Ethereum, that 2,800 handle seems to be pressure. So a lot of things moving up to same support levels or same resistance levels that we've seen, and then getting knocked down. Same thing. Nvidia, every time it tries to make that move to 145, rejected right at 144.99 this morning, and now moving back to the downside a little bit. So the news so far hasn't given us enough to break to those all-time highs. It looked like it wanted to in the pre-market across everything. Qs, SPY, CPI data came out. It looked like they wanted to, but nothing really happening right now. JD Vance says refusal by the Fed to cut rates is monetary malpractice. I don't argue with him there. Gold 33.35. So again, pretty flat. Gold pretty flat since the cash open. Q's pretty flat since the cash open. SPY pretty flat. Bitcoin's shown the volatility so far. Bitcoin's been showing the volatility, but it's still, you can even see that, it's still in that same range. Oil moving back towards the highs of the day. Oil is what's been moving. Targeted that 66.77 area. That is key resistance to watch on the WTI. Don't track Brent as much. Mixed bags across banks. Wells Fargo down about a 0.5 percentage point. JP Morgan slightly down. We do see Bank of America moving to the upside. Chips, we got a mixed bag. NVIDIA, like I said, struggling to break and hold above 145. Intel down about 4.5% today. Not seeing a ton that interests me yet. eToro dropping again today. I don't know how it finished up yesterday. It was one of the laggards to start off with. That one's really pulling back here too. It could get interesting at some point here. It could get interesting here at some point. eToro looks, if it can consolidate a little bit for a few days at this at a level. SPY and the Q have gone negative along with the down now, and now moving. Now we are seeing a move to the downside. Now we are seeing the break to the downside there. I see I got my man Stephen Flanagan, Mr. Currency himself, around. Let's bring him into the room. How are we doing today, Mr. Flanagan?
Yeah, we're doing good, Howard. Middle of the week, and gosh, I love a Wednesday because, when you do this long enough, you find sometimes on a Wednesday, in fact, it's, I think, a high percentage, my own personal opinion, that highs and lows are set, and it gives us a very definitive level in which to watch for the rest of the week. Why are the markets so quiet, with all this news coming out? I can't help thinking back to one of my childhood Looney Tunes, which way did he go, George?
Yeah, I do love my Bugs Bunny. Yeah, I'm with you. It's been, if anything, now we're moving to the downside. I thought that tariffs, moving in the right direction was good news. I would thought that inflation being low would be good news. It doesn't seem to be the case today, does it?
No, it doesn't. And let's understand the mechanics in the marketplace. for our viewers, okay, this is where my specialty was in pricing. Why aren't the markets reacting to the news? Very positive on both fronts. Inflation lower. Everybody talking about inflation coming back in the US. Oh, it's going to break the string of lower numbers. Wrong. Why isn't the China agreement, the framework, having more of an impact? Because people are all naysayers and doubters. The important part here is the market is entrenched in a view, in a narrative, and more importantly, in positions. And in order to get people out of existing positions, there's got to be some sort of break in the tectonic plates that are underlying us right now. And quite honestly, in looking at the China agreement, what is the agreement, right?
Yeah. I pointed that out, this morning, and that's exactly. So we agree to what we agreed to before that we didn't really agree to, I guess. That's, like you said, which way did he go? Which way did he go, George?
The more important point, and this is where the subtleties in the marketplace, as I pointed out on Monday, I'll point out again today, the subtleties. That President of the United States, the President of China met, subsequent negotiations, bang, positive comments out of China officials, positive comments out of the US. You got to look for the subtleties here. This was some sort of major framework that has been agreed to. How it plays out, this is where the entrenched market positions, nobody wants to take a winning position off the table until they are forced to take it off. And that's where we lie today. So, how do I play it? Watch today's close. Tomorrow, use today's close as your pivot point and play it accordingly.
There you go. Because I think part of it too, and I'd have to say, is that the immediate reaction is when you look at a number, and again, I'm just saying what I think retail is looking at right now. 55-10 is the score. It looks like a Patriots Super Bowl. And what I mean there is, out of Trump's tweet himself, China tariffs to us going down to 55%. Our tariffs to China going down to 10%. I think to a retail trader, that doesn't give him the warm and fuzzy. And that might be part of it too. That, we got to see that breakdown and what does it mean? What does all of this mean? When we see the specifics. But I think that that's also part of it, is the headline didn't, blow you away like normally President Trump comes out and, gives you that sizzle line. He didn't give us the sizzle line, I guess, is it. We got to get his PR team together.
Right. And I watched the headline first thing this morning. Will the May inflation report reaffirm the Fed's cautious policy? No.
Yeah, I mean, I started off the show. I don't have Steve, I don't have BigBeat to rail with me, but you can. Yep. What do you need to see at this point? And why is it still the traders are still saying September, buddy.
Yeah. Okay. So what's some good advice for the viewers? Stick and jab, right? Play a game of lacrosse. Stick, jab, jab. Don't get caught up in the movements. Just play your game, jump in and jump out when you see the opportunity and score. The bigger picture, though, let's look at where we are on this Wednesday and let's recap. Remember, my expertise, FX, foreign exchange, global view. Let's look at what's going on. The dollar oversold and appearing to be in a bottoming formation in looking at the dollar index. China, CPI, dropped again, still going down the deflationary spiral hole, and it's picking up speed. Year on year, PPI in China came out minus 2.7%. Well, 3.3%, sorry, for May, and that's after April's minus 2.7. China's imports of oil today fell to a 4-month low. Okay, so China has got a growth problem going on and they're slipping down into deflation. ECB policymaker Kazakis came out today and said one more cut could be not out of the realm. That's despite all the hawks. Remember,
Yeah.
the ECB is full of hawks. And this is historically goes back to the Bundesbank, the German central bank. And we always used to say they're hawkish no matter what, because it goes all the way back to the Weimar Republic and when, they came for a loaf of bread with a wheelbarrow of marks. Okay,
Yeah.
so he even said that at some point, and that's not by any means today, we may need to go into accommodative territory. Okay, UK unemployment just jumped to 4.6 to 4 from 4.5. Japan's PPI dropped again, minus 0.2. Remember, Japan, 25 years of deflation. They need inflation to get themselves out of the hole. Minus 0.2% coming after a year-on-year number of 3.2. That sounds high, but April, it was 4.1. So suddenly it's slipping back the other way. So, and then the US CPI today, 0.1. Everybody said it was going to be 0.3 and totally missed the mark again. Inflation is going down globally. It is not going up. Why the US thinks that we're some sort of outlier here is ridiculous. And this is my point, that I posted on my Twitter earlier in the week. The Fed is just so far behind. If they are data dependent, well, here is a juicy steak bone, Fed. Inflation is lower again. What are you doing? You can't use the words data dependent if you're not data dependent. So, that's where we
are.
They
can. They've used the word for the last 2 years.
Yeah. And that's where we are today. So the global situation is kind of teetering. Now, tomorrow, and I can't wait to get back on Friday already, because tomorrow, Thursday, we have the UK GDP, and that's expected to be negative territory. Industrial production in the UK expected to be quite negative. And the US PPI, everybody's still calling it to be an up number, but after the CPI, let's see if that surprises us again on the downside, as it did in April. So then we have Japanese industrial production before we meet again on Friday, which is expected to be cratering. German CPI expected to be lower. France CPI expected to be lower. And the Eurozone industrial production, after all of these people moved into the Euro because of this April 2nd news, right? And money moves fast and it moves quickly. And the Euro is the number one currency because it's the depth of market where the liquidity is. The Eurozone industrial production is expected to crater as well. Canada manufacturing as well, expected to be minus 2%. And that's all before we meet on Friday. So what I'm trying to say? The global situation is deteriorating rapidly after this, period where everybody front ran the tariffs of April 2nd. That's all going to disappear rapidly as the new numbers begin to come out throughout the world and show a cratering. So Fed has been, in my 40-year career, a leader in the global market. Yes, their responsibility. Some viewers come back and say, yeah, but the Fed's dual mandate is in the U.S. You're absolutely correct. But there is something called the G7 that meets regularly. And the G7 is where the global central banks set policy throughout the world. That is so far out the window right now, you'd almost think that they're going to get rid of the G7. But in a world that's beginning to ebb and drop, and everybody is parked money outside of the U.S., watch for the situation to turn rapidly. Back to today, markets are quiet, given all this news. Watch as the beginning. The first guy out the door could begin to lead the herd.
Absolutely. We love it. We love it. So that boat is still turning, though. It's hit some rough waters on this turnaround, hasn't it?
That is so true. And, I did want to just briefly mention Some of my research work, the Fed had not the Fed, sorry, the Treasury Department had a record debt buyback on June 2nd of 10 billion and another 2 billion on the 3rd. And today they are apparently scheduled to do more. I'm watching that carefully. Why is
today's
it important?
got the longer dated bonds are coming today, right?
Right. So why is it important? Is the Treasury doing an end run on the Fed? Because when they're buying bonds, they are basically adding liquidity and putting pressure for rates to come lower in the bond market, which is everybody talking about, right? That all the debt problems are going to cause a massive problem.
Well, and that's what Besson said, right? These are the levers that they can control to try to keep rates down. They made it clear at Treasury that they will battle the Fed on this, or at least try. It's also, I pointed out to you about, there were two things. Trump just posted CPI just out, great numbers. Fed should lower 1 full point, would pay much less interest on debt coming due. So important. It is important to get that debt down without a doubt. I don't know that they're going to go 1 full point. I think the mark, good Lord.
Yeah.
That would should they, maybe, will they? No.
They will not.
But, it is interesting to see the change in those Treasury buyers, right? Who they are, because we've had to see people step in. China and Japan not buying what they were. I pointed out on the short-term ones, it's stablecoin providers, and Warren Buffett to the rescue. I picture Warren walking in with his velour sweatsuit on and a Diet Coke in one hand and McFlurry in the other, and writing a check for $300 billion worth of short-term treasuries. That's how I go to bed at night thinking about that. But yeah, I mean, are we seeing a change? Is it going to have to be a move from foreign entities? Who's going to be the buyer of these?
That is what the prevailing market wisdom is saying, and that's why the Dixie is in its lows right now. I think we're around 98.80 here.
Even slipped a little since then, 98.78.
Yep. So, last week's close was 99.20. And unless you get above 99.20, there is no case to be made here for the dollar to be turning around. I believe, my opinion is that we will see a higher close this week. Because I think everybody's in this trade and it's just so overloaded in this trade. It's overweight. And I really think that the world, if the equity market in the U.S. begins to decisively make a turn here to the upside any further, the dollar is going to have to follow given the level it's at. But on that note, watch out if for these agreements now to start coming out as we get closer to the July 9th, behind the scenes, United States and Japan being a very large buyer of U.S. treasuries in the bigger picture. People have stopped buying for a time being, but watch out that in the bottom lines, in the small print of some of these agreements, if suddenly the lowering of tariffs from the U.S. side results in a reemergence of your foreign buying of U.S. debt. But recent figures out of the Fed, have not shown foreigners to be sellers of U.S. debt. So that could be a big misnomer when we first
start. Yeah, well, they were sellers, we know, back a month ago or whenever that was, on the day when everything broke in April. Right. But they're not. They haven't been sellers again since then, like you said. Yeah, but they also haven't stepped in to buy. I think, like you said, this is one of the levers that these other foreign countries, especially Japan and China, have to use as a bargaining chip, the same way we're using our bargaining chips. Right? Everybody's pushing the chips onto the table.
Right, and let's get into the weeds here. One reason that the Fed could be holding rates is to, in a world that's going down, is to hold rates high for foreign investors to move money into the U.S. market.
Right.
Because it is an attractive yield. Now, when you throw an attractive yield and an oversold U.S. dollar based on the charts and technicals that we can look at, you have a strong recipe to buy U.S. debt with a cheap dollar. So watch that one carefully. That's not something we play today. That's not something. My advice: stick and jab until you begin to see the change, because everybody, institutional, retail, everybody is in the same starting block. So once it begins to turn, there'll be plenty of opportunities in what I would say, in my scenario, that I see going to be happening.
Awesome. I love it. I do think the only thing I would warn there is what we're hearing from, again, the Jamie Dimons and some of these other folks, is that retail's in. We've heard it from Kevin Green at CN, from Schwab and some of these others. Retail is actually in, but the real money we know is the institutions. They're going to move that needle. They're probably, retail, I think, can take us up to the former all-time highs of the Q and the SPY, but we're going to need those institutions to jump in to push us to that next level.
I don't disagree with that at all. And that's what I started off my conversation by saying. You need to understand, and that's my institutional side. That's the side I've been on in my whole career. They are not reacting to these numbers.
Not at all right now. Yep.
They're all entrenched in views and positions. And remember, in the institutional side, nobody gets paid to take the counter trade. You don't get out there and say, in the world where the dollar is in the dirt and nobody wants to buy it, I'm long dollars. Because then they all look at you and say, what are you, an idiot? Don't you look at our expansive group of analysts that say you can't put that trade on. So they don't get paid to do that, but they don't get
paid. Isn't the second part that I would say too to that is they don't get paid to sit on money, right? They also have to put their money to use. If that's for hedge funds and stuff, having cash on the sidelines. Warren can do that, but if you are a BlackRock, a Blackstone, a Apollo, you've got to put that money to use, right? So if you're not investing in the U.S., you're putting it somewhere right now.
That's right. But let's just say, in my view, that we get this turn, and here we are, right prime in my territory that I've been talking about for the whole year. We're in this June, and this is where I believe it happens. Let's say equities begin to turn, the dollar begins to turn. You're going to have a lot of criticism if you're one of these guys, as you're saying, even Warren Buffett, sitting there with cash, because that's not what they get paid. People are putting money there because they're looking for an extra amount of risk taking.
Absolutely, they're looking for alpha. I'm with you. That I'm with you, and you can see it. And all you got to do is pull up Berkshire's chart. I mean, people are getting out. It's at 490. Down from 542. Just here back. In April 28th. So people are speaking. I've targeted some spots where I think it gets interesting, but it's funny. BigBeat's talked me out of it a little bit, maybe because of the fact is, Warren's gone. Does Greg Abel do these other guys? Are they as good? Listen, Magellan Fund was never the same without Peter Lynch, right? Or I could go as far as saying Fidelity's never been the same without Peter Lynch. Sometimes it is the guy that has the secret sauce.
I couldn't agree more. At some point in time, people are going to say, I'm paying you a fee. Well, I could invest in treasuries. I could go to Treasury Direct online and invest my money in treasuries and not have to pay the VIG.
It's fun you say that. I wasn't planning on bringing this up today, but I want to show you something that I think is rather interesting. One of the largest cryptocurrencies now is BlackRock's BUIDL funds. BlackRock has a fund. I think you know about that is tokenized U.S. treasuries. And what it's done is it shows you how retail is moving into these things. Is that fund right now? Sorry, it takes me a second here to pull it up. I want to tell you how much they're holding, but it's in the billions of dollars that retail is investing through the use of it right now. Yeah, $2.9 billion. So it's interesting, like I said, is to see this change, these things that are happening, like you say, the tectonic shifts. And what I'm seeing is this shift into, this was the realm only of the institutional and accredited investors just, a few years ago. So it's just interesting for me to see. I didn't realize this much interest was already there, that it's almost $3 billion that people have put into this, into crypto and using crypto to get access to U.S. Treasury funds.
Howard, as Steve and you bring a Quasar Markets live to the retail marketplace, you are giving the people the tools necessary to make the same decisions as the institutional traders.
Yeah, that's why I bring it up. I don't think people know. I've always asked, I come to you. How do I get access to that? How should I look at this? Those are the things we want to bring it. You want to buy U.S. Treasuries? You feel that maybe the market is going to go down? I'm not saying today, but whenever. There's access to these things to get short-term fixed income. And it's interesting just to watch this evolve. And to me, it's amazing to see crypto. Like I said, $3 billion. If you had told me that, I wouldn't have believed it. You know what I mean? $3 billion in that fund. I knew it was out there. I just had no idea it was that big already.
And as these tools, such as Quasar Markets, become more available and more people begin to use it, more and more people in our retail space begin to have the same tools as the big boys. And so
I love it.
Why not utilize it? And why do I pay a service fee to you to put money in the same thing that I could do right here?
Yeah, well, that's what we're talking about, Alpha. And I just read a thing. We do have to run, but I have one for you that we'll talk about maybe on Friday if you'd like. There's this big move of private equity coming to making these sort of tokenized funds. We've seen Apollo, KKR, some of these folks. Is it good or is it bad? And I'm going to leave it at that. I don't want to tell you where I am on it, but I would love to talk about that on Friday because I think people are going to be surprised what I say there. And it's an interesting thing. Access to private equity there's a reason accredited investors. There's a lot of ups and downs. And there's a lot of liquidity that isn't there. And you got to be willing to hold this for a long-term, holds. And retail isn't used to that. So that'll give you a little hint of where I'm leaning.
All right. Well, that'll be interesting. But I'll leave you with let's watch Wednesday, the closing levels. Utilize that as your pivot point going into tomorrow. The news is good. If PPI comes in on the lower side tomorrow, going to have a very tough time stopping the tidal wave.
Absolutely. Everybody at Quasar Markets, have a great day. I will be back at 12 o'clock with Agnieszka Wood, our trading mindset coach, and then back tomorrow morning. Everybody have a great day, and thank you so much, Mr. Money, Stephen Flanagan.